Welcome to the first video of your TA Training Academy. In this video, we're going to talk about the introduction to getting to outcomes, laying the background material foundations of where getting to outcomes began. And actually the story began before we could get to know getting to outcomes. We have to really know this man a little bit more. Some of you may know him. This is Dr. Abe Wandersman. He came out to Thailand twice so far. I think his last visit out there was in January of 2019, so about a half a year ago from when I'm making these videos. And he came out to Thailand and did some workshops on getting to outcomes and something we call organizational readiness, which we'll cover in another module, some capacity building workshops in China. But the story of getting to outcomes and understanding what it is and how it is such a huge contribution to the field of healthcare and behavioral health really starts back in the previous century when Abe really became invested in evaluation and changing the world through evaluation. So back in the 80s and 90s, Abe was really working in communities. He, as a community psychologist, he's really interested in how we could form communities, how people could join together and connect from a social cohesion perspective. How could people connect to do things better? How could we connect to transform the human condition and help, whether you're talking about behavioral health or physical health, emotional health? How could we form cohesive units so that communities could be stronger than if left alone? And so he begins to get into these neighborhoods and into these communities and thinking about how we could organize communities to facilitate cohesion, to facilitate that connectedness amongst people. And what he starts to realize is that, there's a lot of mediocrity in the world, whether you're talking about healthcare or mental health services or education. Across the board, there's just a lot of services out there that are promising to do big things, but really falling short from outcomes. And this idea, while it's been really, it's grown hugely over the decades and really is the core base of his passion here. It started in this work in communities, in neighborhoods. It started with these seeds of why aren't we doing things better? And I'm sure as you're listening to me say this and reflect on Abe's early experiences, you may be thinking that too, like, we know that there are problems here. We know we could fix these problems, but why aren't things going better? Just at a real core level, why isn't this happening better? And it became really frustrating to Abe. It became really, really challenging. And so Abe became really active as a community psychologist in the world of evaluation. And he said, well, maybe if we could get out there and we could evaluate how people are doing things, if we could evaluate how these community coalitions are joining together to better whatever problem they're trying to solve, if we could evaluate them, if we could give them data and help them along the way so that we could do things better in a data-informed sort of way, well, then maybe we'll have an impact. Maybe we can move the needle a little. So he went out there and he's working with community coalitions at the time, and he's trying, right? And evaluation at the time was largely this traditional type of evaluation where evaluators would go out and they would collect a bunch of data. And then they would come back with a big old report full of papers and say, here's your evaluation report. And they would give it to these coalitions or these organizations, and the data would just sit there. The data would just sit on someone's desk and really never translate to action. And it wasn't at the fault of the communities. It sat there because it's hard to use data in that way. It's not always natural to take a huge evaluation report of 100 pages and translate that to action. It's not that easy. And so around, as he's doing this work, the turn of the century, Abe partners up with the other man you see on the screen here. His name is Dr. David Fetterman, and he's good friends with Abe, and they're thinking about this issue. They're thinking about, if we're doing all of this evaluation if we're doing this evaluation, why are we not getting results? It's becoming frustrating. Why are we not able to take this data and translate to action? And they're looking at all of their colleagues in evaluation who are facing the similar situations. And they're looking at this and saying, not only is this a problem here, but we're spending billions of dollars on new programs and evidence-based practices that aren't getting results in our communities, and they're sure as not getting results in international communities, in different cultures and in different contexts. And so we need to do something about this. So from this, both from this friendship and from this passion, out sprouts something called empowerment evaluation. The two of them had this epiphany that if we are really going to move this needle, if we're really going to take people from this place of simply implementing evidence-based practices without knowledge of how to adapt it to new cultural contexts, if we're going to take these evidence-based practices and put them into place and simply spend a lot of money, a lot of resources on evaluations that ultimately people find as punitive, right? A lot of times when you go in and you evaluate and you come out with this really big stack and this large evaluation report, the community doesn't feel grateful. They often feel like they're doing something wrong. So Abe and David Fetterman decided to flip it over, turn it on its head and say, let's fundamentally change the way we do evaluation. Instead of being external consultants that come in, evaluate and leave, what if we build evaluation into everything communities do? What if we take the skills that we have studied for the past few decades and give them to people? Give them to the communities we work with so that we're not doing the evaluation, but the communities are doing the evaluation. The healthcare systems are doing the evaluation. The organizations that are implementing are evaluating themselves. What if we make evaluation mainstream? And so out of this sprouts something they call empowerment evaluation. And empowerment evaluation is an entire new framework of evaluation where in it is embedded the building of the evaluation capacity. So giving communities and coalitions and countries and different cultures across the globe the skills and abilities to plan, monitor, and evaluate programming. This way, we can not only get to outcomes in one sense, in one program, in one initiative, but in all programs in a sustained sort of way. And so at the time, this was really revolutionary, and it got a lot of pushback. The traditional evaluators out there did not like this idea. They did not like this idea of giving their skill set, the thing that they've trained in for so many decades, and giving it to people. It felt awkward. It felt different. But Abe and David kept pushing forward and said no. And as you could see on the screen, they've published many, many books on the topic. Empowerment evaluation has really taken over the field of evaluation because we now realize as a field, we all have the same epiphany that they did years ago, decades ago, that if we want to really make a change, we need to give the skills of evaluation to the people who are doing programming, because we cannot simply give huge reports of data and expect to make a change. We need to be able to give those skills to others and teach people how to do systematic planning, monitoring, and evaluation so that they too could get to the results. But in pure Abe fashion, he doesn't stop there, because one thing I forgot to mention about Abe is that he is an academic, he's a researcher, but he's sort of the black sheep amongst the academics because Abe is interested in practical applications. It doesn't matter if there's textbooks written on this topic if the textbooks aren't used. If the textbooks aren't implemented and given to the people who need it, there's no point in research and books that sit on shelves. The content in the book needs to be brought to action. And so Abe dedicated the next many, many years, I don't even know how many, to studying why are programs not successful. So if we're going to go out there and we're going to teach communities and organizations and countries how to do evaluation, we need to know what they're evaluating. We need to know why are programs not successful. There are no shortage of good ideas in this world. Why are only some of them working? Why are only some of them, and sadly, only a small number of them, why are only a few making its way? And so Abe did decades of work here where he studied and distilled this down to 3 simple pieces. In order to be successful, you need to successfully plan, you need to successfully monitor, and you need to successfully evaluate programming. These are the 3 core ingredients to successful programs, no matter what you're talking about: healthcare, behavioral health, emotional health, education, what have you. Planning, monitoring, and evaluating are these 3 components that lay the foundation for success. And out of this, once he moved forward with this, and he's now, I'm going to make myself a little bit bigger. He's now doing this work, and he's realizing, okay, we need to plan, we need to monitor, and we need to evaluate success. But when you say that to communities that don't know how to do this, they say, that sounds nice. Now what? How do I do that successfully? And so this is the idea where getting to outcomes comes from. This is the core of getting to outcomes. So back in the 90s and the early 2000s, Abe and 2 graduate students of his at the time, Matt Chinman and Pam Im, came up with the Getting to Outcomes framework. And the Getting to Outcomes framework is a simple step-by-step how to approach, how to do empowerment evaluation. It is an operationalization of empowerment evaluation. It is the accumulation of all of this work that Abe has done, all of this passion that Abe has pushed forward for the past few decades until that moment where he said, we need to teach others how to do it, and we need to tell them how. It's enough that we've studied this for the past few decades. Now we need a simple, guided, step-by-step approach that teaches folks how to do this in the real world. So Getting to Outcomes is a 10-step program of accountability. It makes the systematic planning, monitoring, and evaluation accessible to other people. It makes it, he has made it user-friendly and easy for other communities to use, other people, other non-evaluators to use, because of this step-by-step approach to planning, monitoring, and evaluating effective programs. So there are 10 steps in GTO. The 10 steps are organized by this logical fashion. So steps 1 through 6 take you from having a problem that you want to address and moving it all the way down to having a very high quality systematic plan for how to implement that program. Then you implement it and evaluate it as you're implementing it. You improve it, and you sustain it in the long term. So 7, 8, 9, and 10 are about evaluating and improving. So again, planning, monitoring, evaluation. This is the core of what Getting to Outcomes is about. This is the full Getting to Outcomes support system model. I'm not going to go into it in detail here. I'm just foreshadowing that this is where we're going. As we think about TAs and what TAs will be doing in Thailand, this is a big basis. This is the framework we're moving off of. So we'll be revisiting this full support system in the future. I just wanted to show you that Getting to Outcomes is embedded within a larger system of support. It's embedded in an entire system that is geared towards building the capacities for people across the globe to be able to plan, monitor, and evaluate successfully. And we have a whole system to support you in doing so. These are the 10 GTO steps, and the rest of this module will cover these 10 GTO steps in detail. In this video, I'm just going to go briefly over what they are, and then we will revisit them step by step in the later videos. Step 1 is a needs and resource assessment. From your needs and resource assessment, you move on to goals and desired outcomes. What is the problem that needs to be changed the most? Step 3 is best practices. Step 3, 4, and 5 fit together because what we found over the years of doing evaluation work in communities is that you need to select the right program. And so 3, 4, and 5 help people select the right program based on the needs and their goals. After you have the program, choosing the right program is not enough. You need to actually implement it, and that involves taking a really high quality plan, implementing it, and evaluating how it's doing. Then you need actual data to see if it works. This is the land, step 8 is the land that the traditional evaluator lives in. So all of this stuff before it is the contribution largely of empowerment evaluation, but empowerment evaluation has synthesized a lot of these steps from other literatures. CQI stands for continuous quality improvement. This is improving the program over time. And then step 10 is sustaining it over time, because it's not cost effective to put all of this work in and then have it fall to the wayside when funding ends. So step 10 is about sustaining programs in the long term. So again, if we take these steps and we embed them in these core components that Abe discovered when he was studying the art of what it takes to have outcomes in years prior, we could see that the first six steps are about planning. Then we dive into monitoring, and then we dive into evaluation. So one of the questions we hear all the time as we talk to communities and organizations about GTO, and they always say, but aren't we already doing this? I mean, we have goals. We chose an evidence-based practice. What is new here? We collect data. We're doing an RCT. That's evaluation. And the truth is, you're right. You're right. You're doing all this. In fact, I'm going to let you in on the secret of GTO. The secret of GTO is that Abe didn't create any of those steps. He didn't create any of them. He synthesized them. So people were doing needs assessments way before Abe ever came up with empowerment evaluation. People were looking at outcomes way before that. Goals, desired outcomes, the need for evidence-based practices and fitting it into a particular culture. None of that is new to GTO. But what GTO offers is a user-friendly translation of a lot of dense literatures. There's so many dense empirical literatures on every single one of those 10 GTO steps. And if a particular community tries to go out and dive into every single one of those literatures, it would be exhausting and overwhelming. Could you imagine doing that when you're just trying to implement a program, is to learn every single thing about every single one of those steps? And so what Abe did was he synthesized it and translated it to make a simple how-to approach that makes it easy to implement, okay? Each step is broken down with the how-to, what to do. And so GTO offers accountability. You may hear us say GTO is a system of accountability, a 10-step system of accountability. And what that means is you may be doing all of the steps. Or if you're like most communities and organizations, you might be doing some of the steps really well and some of the steps not at all. I can't tell you how many, especially grant-funded projects I've worked on that weren't focused on sustainability. They focused on getting the outcomes for the project while the funding was in place, but sustainability fell wayside, as if just leaving the program alone once it's up and running is going to be enough to sustain it in the long term. And so what Abe has done has been to put all of these steps in one place, so that if you are doing all of the steps, then you are being accountable to outcomes. You are being accountable to the funders. You are being accountable to the people whose lives you're trying to change. Because if you are doing all of these steps, you're doing everything it takes to be successful. You are planning, monitoring, and evaluating. So again, all of the steps were not created new. It's simply focusing on what you're doing well and what you need to do better. The next and last thing we hear when I talk about 10 steps is I hear a version of, but do we need to do all 10 of them? This is a lot of work. How could I do 10 steps? Can't we just do, I don't know, 3 or 4 steps? Well, let me reassure you. Yes, all 10 are important. In fact, as we go through, if you may be feeling this, you might be feeling like, I don't know how we're going to do all 10. This feels overwhelming. I can't do all 10 steps. So let me reassure you of two things. One, yes, you can. And you can because I bet you're already doing a lot of it. I bet much of this is already streamlined into your daily work. Again, GTO is about accountability. It's about going back and figuring out where you need to tweak things to do them a little bit better. It's surfacing the areas that you might want to strengthen and the areas that are already strong. So yes, you have to do all 10 because which one would you get rid of? Goals, outcome evaluation? They're all pretty darn important. So you do need to do all 10. However, you're probably doing many already. And secondly, so doing all 10 is probably very compatible and aligned with what you're already doing. Second, I want to remind you of the beginnings again, right? I want to take you back to Abe Wandersman, who's thinking about planning, monitoring, evaluation, studying it from a very scientific and rigorous way, and then taking all of that and breaking it down into small incremental parts. And there are 10 steps because it's easier and simpler to understand one piece at a time rather than a big chunk like planning. So he's broken the process of planning down into 6 consecutive steps. And by doing that, he makes it much more user-friendly and easier to implement. And indeed, that is feedback we get across many projects, is that breaking it down into small steps helps us move along in a more systematic and accountable way. So don't be overwhelmed by the number, or at least trust me for now that the number is not too hard, because I promise you that this is a guided process that will move us along, and you are doing a lot of this already, and much of it you're probably doing well. And for those areas that are not going as well, GTO offers a way to be accountable to do them better. So GTO, like anything else, is about practice. So on the screen, you have a piano player. And I don't know if anyone's ever played piano, but piano is about practice. It's about playing. And at first, you may hit a couple keys, right? You may hit a couple keys, and maybe by virtue, it makes beautiful music. But most likely what happens when you're banging those keys is that it sounds like pure chaos. And it's kind of like what we see in program evaluation most of the time. People are doing a lot of things and they're banging the keys, and sometimes they luck into outcomes and it's beautiful and wonderful and we see success in the real world. But most of the time, what we see is chaos. And so GTO offers a systematic approach. It offers the music notes on the page. It offers a way to get out there and to practice music. So when you're banging on the keys, you're making beautiful music and you're getting to the outcomes through a systematic planning, monitoring, and evaluation process. But in order to go from banging the keys to beautiful orchestration, you need to practice. You need to try it out. And so this TA Training Academy is designed to be a step-by-step process. I broke videos down into the simple, small components to step you in an easy way. We could always go deeper into any individual step. There is a lot of depth to GTO. These videos, to start off, are started at a shallower level, right? So I don't want to throw you in the deep water. I want to step you into the shallow end. So we're going to go step by step by step. And as we go through each step, I want you to practice. I want you to try it out. I want you to see how it feels to do these steps. And then I want you to come back to me. And if you have any questions or comments or concerns, then we'll go deeper. We'll go deeper into each step. So I encourage you to stay interactive with me. I could always hop out a video. I could always make a new one. So we're going to go through the next video is about the 10 steps to GTO at a bigger picture level. Then we'll go step by step down and drill down deeper, but we could always go deeper. So ask questions, be engaged, and keep practicing. I'll see you all in the next video.